Warren McCorriston, who is the current prime suspect in the disappearances of two teenage girls in 1979, still has pending sexual assault charges in Queensland to be decided upon. I don't believe I have specifically discussed these charges in any of my previous videos. This was partly because I had little information about them, but I have recently come across a newspaper report from October 2023 that discusses those charges in more detail and why they were not previously reported on. Going back to November 2019, I did recall hearing something about those charges when a new suspect in the disappearances of Amanda Robinson and Robyn Hickie was first reported. The following snippets from NBN television news were probably the only reporting on this that I came across at the time.
They've honed in on a new suspect who lived in the Hunter at the time, a 58-year-old Gold Coast businessman who we can't name. He was recently granted bail in Queensland over sexual offences.
This new person of interest is originally from Newcastle, but he's been living here in Surfers Paradise. He's recently been charged with sexual offences relating to women he met online, including rape. Do you have anything to say about your recent charges, the sexual assault allegations?
This made me curious to find out more about those charges, but I found nothing else, and after that it seemed they were never referred to again. I even started to wonder if they'd ever existed at all, but on the 4th of September 2021, there was an implied reference to those charges in a report in the Weekend Australian that I covered in my video, The Secret Life and Crimes Behind Warren McCorriston's Respectable Business Facade. Police disclosed two missing teenage girls were at the heart of their inquiries, and that there were some issues and concerns in New South Wales and Queensland. But anyway, what was this newspaper report I discovered from a few months ago? It was on page 9 of the Weekend Australian on the 14th of October 2023, where David Murray reported the following. A former hospitality executive who has emerged as a person of interest in the suspected murders of two teenagers more than 40 years ago, has been charged with sex offences against 4 Queensland women. Warren John McCorriston is accused of procuring sex acts from the women through false pretences after meeting them online, and of raping one of the women, who has since taken her own life. This was also mentioned in the September 2021 article that I mentioned before, and I also discussed that in the same video. Here's a little clip of that now. Some victims were people well known to him. Others, women he allegedly terrorised after they met on Seeking Arrangement, a matchmaking site for sugar daddies and sugar babies. One woman, tragically, would take her own life, the Weekend Australian can reveal. So that's the first time I've heard of that. I haven't seen it mentioned elsewhere, so don't know the details behind that. So in that video, I obviously didn't make the connection that they were the Queensland charges. So anyway, I shall continue. The alleged offences were discovered by New South Wales Police Strike Force Arapaima detectives during their investigations into Mr. McCorriston, 62, as a person of interest in the disappearances of Lake Macquarie teenagers Amanda Robinson, 14, and Robyn Hickie, 18. Detectives from the strike force passed on their information to the Queensland counterparts, who arrested and charged Mr. McCorriston in August 2019 with offending against the 4 women over the previous 3 months. So, it wasn't a coincidence that there were charges at the time for the sexual offences in Queensland when he was arrested by Strike Force Arapaima. So I had thought that maybe the discovery of those charges in Queensland tipped off Strike Force Arapaima that he was someone to look at. But it seems it was the other way around. They were already looking at him and discovered those offences, and that resulted in the Queensland charges being implemented before the New South Wales ones in December, or actually it was January 2020 he got arrested, but yeah. Okay, the article then goes on to say the changes can only now be revealed after Queensland this month introduced new laws allowing people charged with sex offences to be named prior to being committed to stand trial. So, that is the explanation, I would say, as to why there'd been pretty much no reporting on that previously. So maybe the NBN reports might have been a slip-up, or maybe they were able to get away with it because it was a local New South Wales news, not a national, but yeah, I'd say since didn't hear about it since, maybe that was a minor slip-up by them. But then we have the question, why, if the charges had already been made in Queensland prior to the New South Wales ones, didn't the Queensland courts hang on to him to face the charges he was already convicted of before sending him to New South Wales? But I guess maybe it was because New South Wales gave them the tip-off, so they thought, well, they're the ones with all the information. We'll let them have a go at him first. But maybe more importantly, perhaps the charges for the sex offences in New South Wales were much more serious. Maybe there was more stronger evidence that they thought would get a conviction, so get him done in New South Wales first. He obviously hasn't been committed for trial yet for the Queensland ones. I'm suspecting maybe that's because he can't have the trial. Might be something to do with different states. Maybe because he's in New South Wales, they can't have the trial till he's released from prison. Not real sure on that. Something might check up on at some stage. Yeah, so I dare say maybe they're just happy for New South Wales to hang on to him and they'll get that sorted out later. I'm not sure at all, but anyway. Mr. McCorriston was body corporate manager of the Gold Coast Q1 apartment complex at the time of his arrest, and was previously manager of Daydream Island Resort in the Whitsundays. He has not been charged in connection to the suspected murders of Robinson and Hickie, who vanished within weeks of each other in April 1979. The teenagers were once suspected to be victims of backpacker killer Ivan Milat, which mentioned in the last video. Southport Magistrates Court documents, viewed by the Weekend Australian, show Mr. McCorriston has been charged in Queensland with 4 counts of procuring sex acts by false pretences and 1 rape. The alleged rape victim was a mother aged in her 30s who committed suicide in the months after Mr. McCorriston was charged. Queensland authorities have not withdrawn the rape charge and will be able to rely on evidence and statements gathered before the woman's death, senior legal sources said. The offences against the women are alleged to have occurred at locations including the Hilton and Westin hotels in Brisbane CBD and Voco Hotel in Surfers Paradise. One of the conditions of Mr. McCorriston's bail was that he not access or use any social media or online dating websites. He is alleged to have almost immediately breached his release orders by continuing to contact women online, but was allowed to remain on bail in the community. Why? Seems a bit odd. Seems like he's a risk to the community and they're letting him. Anyway, they must have their reasons. Mr. McCorriston was then arrested again in January 2020 and extradited to New South Wales to face new and separate charges relating to sexual assaults against 3 other women in the New South Wales Hunter region between 1979 and 1997. Those charges did not relate to Robinson and Hickie. Strikeforce Arapaima investigators, led by Lake Macquarie's Detective Sergeant Christy Faber, I think it's pronounced Faber, I think I pronounced it Faber in the last video, allegedly discovered while looking into Mr. McCorriston that he was a prolific user of online dating and so-called sugar daddy websites used by men to offer financial rewards for sex. Now, I won't read the next bit because it's basically a repeat of the article I read, or what was in the article I read from the last video. Well, we'll just summarise it basically. So it talks about the Scouts fundraiser in 1979 and how Amanda Robinson was probably walking past there as it was finishing up, and there was the accused or subsequently charged sex offenders, the twin brothers. It's believed Warren McCorriston was there, and also George Cecil, who was never convicted of child sex offences but was convicted of having child pornography. And part of the reason for that was, because there was a boy who accused George Cecil of sexually assaulting him in the 1970s as a scout, and he said Warren McCorriston would know about it, and basically, well, it says it here, I'll continue now anyway. But Mr. McCorriston did not corroborate the account when approached by police, instead offering staunch support for Cecil, who was not charged with Mr. Steele's abuse and died in 2015. It has raised a question of whether Mr. McCorriston was covering up for Cecil, and if so, why? Now, that would be a good question. Why would he cover up if he was aware of any sexual assault against someone who was his friend at the time? Seems very unusual. I guess maybe, well, George Cecil knew about Warren McCorriston's sex offences, which he's now being convicted of. Or perhaps he had more information on the other things that he hasn't been charged with yet. I mean, you'd kind of think if it's what he's been convicted of, he would reveal, or maybe he has revealed, at least to the police, why he covered for, why he possibly covered for George Cecil. I'll just check some notes here. Yeah, so the other thing is maybe, like with the disappearances, I mean, there was the other sex offenders at the Scouts meeting. Maybe there was more than one offender. Perhaps, I'm only suggesting this, I don't know, so it's only an alleged. Yeah, perhaps they were both in on whatever happened. Because there was, yeah, well, as I said, child abuse material that George Cecil had. Apparently there was also stuff involving human torture and who knows, but yeah. It's also interesting that David McCorriston, Warren McCorriston's brother, was also convicted of sex offences in 2022. They were ones against children, boys. Apparently, this is David McCorriston, he did report in 2006, which was 2 years before the accusations were made against George Cecil. He reported that he was sexually assaulted as a child, and I guess there's that link. They often say that sex offenders may have been the victims of sex offences themselves when they were children, and that's a factor in leading to them repeating the behaviour that they were a victim of. But it is a choice. It doesn't mean you're sexually assaulted as a child that you then repeat the behaviour. So it does make me wonder if perhaps Warren McCorriston was also a victim of sexual abuse by those Scout leaders. Do recall reading in the information when he was sentenced. There was something said about he suffered abuse from his father, but I believe it was more physical than, well, not so much sexual. But perhaps if he was getting abused at home and abused at the Scouts, or perhaps he felt supported at the Scouts, and very unusual. But anyway, I'll just finish off the article and summarise. Mr. McCorriston was a year below Hickie at Belmont High School. She was last seen at a bus stop on the Pacific Highway at Belmont North on Saturday, April 7, 1979. Investigators believe that due to a previous incident hitchhiking, she would have got into a car only with someone she knew. So that's assuming that was how she disappeared, by voluntarily getting into a car. In 2021, police dug up areas around the old Canangra Scout camp at Nords Wharf in search of the remains of Robinson and Hickie, and offered $1 million rewards for information on each of the disappearances. Mr. McCorriston has been central to inquiries since Arapaima launched in April 2019. Okay, so I'll wind up now. Right, so in an article from September 21, it was mentioned, well, it was also mentioned, because I've mentioned that article a few times in this video, that there was a possible fraud involving $140,000 being looked into. In the video where I discussed this, I mentioned there was a hearing on the 8th of February 2022 at Southport Court, and that maybe it was related to the fraud, but I didn't know, and it could have been something else. Now I'm thinking perhaps it was related to those sexual assault charges, but could still be something else, or it could be the fraud. But yeah, I guess there's a few accusations there that he's facing. A few things we learnt from this newspaper article from October 2023. So it was Strike Force Arapaima that found out about the crimes in Queensland. Yeah, I had wondered how they got onto Warren McCorriston, but now I'm thinking about it, they probably were looking back at sex-related crimes or accusations from the late 70s, early 80s, and he did have that acquitted attempted rape charge in the 1980. So they probably thought, yeah, he looks like someone worth looking into, and doing a few online searches found out about his sugar daddy's profiles and joined the dots from there, I'd say. Yeah, so we also learned why we probably haven't heard about those charges other than those couple of little news snippets early on. And that's because in Queensland, until someone's committed to stand trial, it can't be publicly released who they are. But yeah, then they changed that law. I think it was actually September, not October. And yeah, they can give out the name when they're actually charged. So that gave the press then the freedom to discuss those charges. Yeah, and a new question popped into my mind whether Warren McCorriston, if he was involved in the disappearances from the late 70s, whether he acted alone or not. Maybe they should have a chat with the Mattia brothers as well, see what they know. Yeah, so since these new charges were made against Warren McCorriston, there's been a big spike in the number of views on my YouTube channel, and I've gotten quite a few comments and messages and from people, and positive feedback that people like what I'm doing and the way I do it. So I say thank you, and I will try and be a bit more regular in making videos this year. Oh yeah, one that interested me was they had a description of what Warren McCorriston was like at school. Now, it was from someone they knew who was in the same year as Warren McCorriston, so this is kind of third-hand hearsay, but this is what they said. He presented as a wallflower, stood back from things. His school group was apparently the smart nerds. Others of his year recall the Green Tirana. So that's an interesting insight to what he was like at the time. But there was another thing that I thought was a little scary, for me anyway, because anyone that knew me at school would probably say the same thing about me, except our behaviours are obviously nothing alike. Seems he had a dark side that's led him down a different path and different behaviours in life. But anyway, it's all about choices. You are who you are, and you choose the path you travel, as they say. Oh yeah, and also my Tirana was blue, not green. Anyway, if you'd like to see more of my videos, you know what to do. Subscribe, click on the bell, watch out for my videos. I hope to get another one out about the Mateer brothers in the next couple of weeks. They're apparently having a sentencing hearing on the 2nd of February. I do have a bit more to report about the hearings last year into their offences and the outcome of that, which happened last year. So I'll probably combine that in one video if there's anything of interest that comes out of the sentencing hearing. Anyway, I'm David A. Elliott. Have a good one and see you around. Like a whistle.